Welcome back. You got under the thing that the airline stewardess does, the airline attendant does when she says, this is a flight that's going to. So you've all wisely picked the panel, Emotion Sensing, the Next Big Trend. And I love that in the healthcare space, we're using the word emotion. Right? This isn't a word that we used to use a lot. And Joanne Jenkins talked about loneliness and purpose, two things we didn't used to talk about a lot. The panel that you guys are about to listen to is going to talk about this next generation of sensors and wearables. And I know I stopped wearing my Fitbit because it made me feel terribly about myself. Because all it did was just point out how out of shape that I don't move around and I never ever sleep. And what I love about this whole next generation is it would know what made me happy and it would know what made me sad. And so it would tell me different things and do different things. And that's an extraordinary advance in how we're all understanding ourselves and what makes us tick and what makes us happy or sad. So to help us figure out how emotion sensing technology can be used to really help improve our lives is the one and only Jennifer Jo. And for those of you who don't know her, Google her, I did. She's got an extraordinary sort of CV and suite of passion she's working on. She's a Brigham and Women's nephrology graduate turned physician, social entrepreneur. I love that. CEO of Medstro.com and editor-in-chief of MedTechBoston.com. She's in incredibly high demand with all sorts of big brands that have big pedigree, asked to speak really all across the country. And I would just paraphrase for you that in what I saw, you're really obsessed with what we should be doing with these technologies to help make our lives truly better in the way that each and every person in this room would define what being better actually is. So with no further ado, Jennifer Jo.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Jo, and I'll be your moderator for this exciting panel on emotion sensing. It's going to be very dynamic, and we're going to have some volunteers come up onto stage. So think about if you want to come onto stage and have your expressions or emotions captured forever. We have three fantastic and innovative panelists who will introduce us to the amazing world of emotion sensing. What is emotion sensing? What can wearable sensors do? What are they tracking? And how will they improve our health? These are all questions we plan to answer for you this morning. First, we're going to start with some brief introductions. So each panelist will introduce herself for about a minute or two, tell you about her company and what they're working on. And then each panelist is going to do a 10-minute deep dive. And they're going to come up and potentially do a demo and a presentation. And then we want to take questions from you, our audience members. So why don't we go ahead and get started?
Great. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Gabi Zidjerveld. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Affectiva. I head up, obviously all the marketing functions, but also our product strategy and new market entries. Affectiva is an MIT Media Lab spin-off. We've been in market for a number of years, and what we do is emotion recognition software. In a little bit, I'll show you actually a live demo of how it works, and I'll tell you a bit more about how it's being used today and where we see this technology being applied in the future. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Czerwinski. I'm a research manager at Microsoft Research in Redmond, Washington. My background is actually as a cognitive psychologist, but I stumbled onto doing effective computing about 5-6 years ago. Actually, some of my colleagues that introduced me to the field came from MIT Media Lab under Roz Bakar, some of her students who I work with now very closely. And we do emotion sensing in real time using sensors, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But we also think the really hard problem isn't the sensing itself. That's almost becoming an off-the-shelf commodity. The real hard thing to do is what do you do about it? And so you'll see a lot of our research is once we know the emotion of the user, what can we therefore do with systems, software technology to help the user on their behalf?
Hello, my name is Kristin Neidlinger. I'm the founder and lead designer at Sensoree Design Lab. We create Therapeutic Biomedia, and what that is biosensors that read how you're feeling real time, and then we translate that data into visual or tactile displays. This started as my master's thesis in 2010. We put it on the internet, and here I am, still going with it. We're working on our first product, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you to our panelists, and we'll move into the demo presentations.
Yeah, great. So I'll start. Just for context, as this was also mentioned, our company spun out of MIT Media Lab in 2009 and was co-founded by two women scientists, Dr. Rosalind Picard and Dr. Rana El-Kalyoubi. Rana today is our CEO. Roz started the field of affective computing and still is the head of the affective computing lab at MIT, but also chief scientist at a company called Empathica. Empathica is out there in the exhibit hall as well. They're doing massively interesting work with their sensors and their technology, so I certainly encourage you to have a look there as well. And so we're Affectiva. What we do, as I mentioned earlier, is emotion recognition software. We do not use devices. We basically have software that can run in all kinds of different environments. And by turning on the camera, we measure facial expressions of emotion. And the best way to show how this works is actually to do a demo. And I need a guinea pig in the audience. Is anyone who would like to share their face? Please come on up. Okay, let me turn this on. And then for the EAV folks, if we could, when our demo person comes up, if we could switch over. Hi, I'm Gabi.
Hi, Melody.
Melody, thank you so much for stepping up. So Melody, it's easier if you hold this yourself. So what we have here is a simplified version of our technology just running in a demo app. By the way, it's also available in the App Store and Google Play. It's called AffDex.me, or just search for Affectiva. Anyone can just have a look at this. But as you can see, why don't you give us a big smile? Or a frown, like brow furrow, or look angry. It's not quite, you're not angry enough.
I don't anger easily.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing, I guess. But the idea is here that our algorithms, computer vision, machine learning, we're also applying deep learning methodologies, frame the face, identify key landmarks on the face, like the corner of the eyes, tip of the nose, corner of the mouth. And then as Melody moves her face, makes facial muscle movements, we identify facial expressions, and then combinations of facial expression are mapped to emotion.
It did register some anger when
Yeah, you had an angry red face a little bit.
That's right.
And then just for these demo purposes, we've made a mapper to these emojis, so for kicks and giggles. But that's the idea. It's a very simple.
Well, I'm mostly registering joy, which is kind of awesome. So
You would identify yourself as a joyful person?
always, if I can make sure that happens always, then that's what I try to do.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you, Melody.
Thank
you
you.
so much. Right. So, yeah. Thank you, Melody. So our technology is available in a number of different ways. I wasn't going to use PowerPoint today, but I just wanted to talk about it briefly, so you have a feel for where this is being applied today. I think I can just here. And just sit here and continue. So as a company, when we first spun out of MIT Media Lab, we got our first start in media and advertising. It was a very logical fit right away because, of course, big money is spent on advertising. And to optimize that content and make the most engaging, emotionally engaging ad content, big brands and their market researchers want to test how consumers respond to that content. So that's today still our biggest revenue generating market. Over 1,400 brands in 75 countries have used our technology to test all their ads. Unilever, for example, working together with a big market research firm, uses our technology to test every single ad they put out. So that was a very interesting first start for us. We actually have a product offering for them. It's a cloud-based solution that these companies can access to upload their media, and then basically we measure frame by frame how people respond to that content. So that's, if you will, kind of our core market where we first got started. But then in recent years, there's been a shift. First and foremost, we started packaging our technology differently. We now have software developer kits, or SDKs, so we can license our technology to others so that they can embed this emotion sensing into whatever it is they are building. And this allowed us to go into gaming, online education, automotive, robotics, and of course now also healthcare. Healthcare is a bit early days for us. We are having a lot of conversations. There's a lot of research being done using our technology. To date, not a lot of solutions in market yet. We expect that will change in the next couple of years. But in healthcare, the applications vary from obviously telemedicine, video communications, maybe applying a mood meter, to mindfulness apps, to drug efficacy testing. So pharmaceutical companies are quite interested in getting unbiased emotion data rather than using the typical rating scales. There's also a lot of research being done around mental health afflictions, so anxiety disorders, depression. There's a researcher, Stephen Vanoy at UMass Amherst, that's using our technology to do research on helping people with depression. And autism research, where frankly we first got started. When we were at MIT Media Lab, a lot of research was being done, finding out how this technology could be used to help people on the autism spectrum. And a company called BrainPower has now licensed our technology. And I think it's massively interesting what they're doing. We have a little case study on our website. They're using Google Glass, and they've developed a program of apps that, especially for children, helps them in kind of a playful, educational manner detect people's emotion and then respond accordingly. So imagine a child might be wearing Google Glass, and they're looking at someone. Our technology registers that that person might be smiling, and then they see an emoji on the screen, and they're prompted, and they get audio feedback as well. They're prompted they might hear something like, hey, this person is smiling, why don't you smile back? Or there's some exercises they can do where it says, tilt your head left if, you want to match this to a smiley emoji face or a frowny emoji face. So it's for them also fairly early stages. They're enrolling in clinical trials right now, but from our perspective, it's a really interesting example of how this technology can be used in that type of work and research. So for anyone that's interested, our SDKs are available on our website. They're available across a number of platforms: iOS, Android, Linux, Windows, JavaScript, Unity. So if there's anyone in the audience that has a technical background and would like to tinker with that and integrate it into whatever you're building, by all means, please do so. So let me leave it at that for now.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And now we're going to have Mary with Microsoft.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here. Can't really see my slides very well. Okay, I'll look over there. Today I'm going to talk about some of the lessons we've learned employing these kinds of emotion detection technologies. Can go to the next slide. I see, okay. We, over the last several years, we're pretty agile, and we've developed quite a few applications looking at emotion sensing. And probably too hard to read this whole table, but as you can see, we've used just about every kind of sensor you can possibly imagine to try to use for emotion detection on real people. So we've done everything from looking at your face, as you just saw a demo of, to listening to your voice. The voice actually tells you a lot about emotion. When you get stressed, your glottal muscles actually tighten. You may speak in a more halting way or more staccato kind of way. And we can tell a lot about the prosody from your speech. We've also looked at other kinds of biosensors where you might wear electrodermal activity bracelets on the wrist, which detects sweatiness of your skin. It used to be called galvanic skin response. Some of you might recognize that term. So we use those a lot in our research. You can also have your patients or users wear chest monitors, heart rate monitors. And there you're looking not at heart rate, but at heart rate variability, so the variability of the beat to beat. When there's a high variability, you're actually happy. When there's very low variability, that means you're actually in fight or flight mode, very stressed, possibly depressed. So that can be extremely useful, and we use that a lot in our research. And other kinds of logging. So we have a logger that logs everything you do on your computer and on your phone. Actually is very indicative of your mood. When you tend to be depressed, you're not going to be as active on your phone per se, but it may vary individual by individual. So we've tried all these different ways of sensing, and then what we try to do is either we do just-in-time interventions, is what we call them, where we see that stress might be escalating, and we can send you a kind of suggestion, skill, or activity that you might be able to deploy in the moment to reduce your stress. Or we may just be showing you, revealing to you your patterns over time, and especially in the context within which you were in. So maybe who you're with determines how you feel. Maybe the kind of meeting you just came out of determines how you feel. And it might be interesting for you to see those patterns in your daily life that you might not be so aware of. The best combination we've found in our research for detecting mood is actually threefold. So we would love to see your face, we would love to have some kind of an EDA monitor on your skin, or a heart rate monitor on your chest, and we'd love to hear your voice. That's like the trifecta. That's the perfect way to detect mood. But we can't always rely on that. Sometimes people don't want to wear things, especially the heart rate monitors on the chest can be very uncomfortable if you have to wear it all day. So a lot of times all you have is the face and the voice, and you can still do pretty well with that. And of course you need ground truth. Well, how do you detect ground truth? It can be that the system you're working with knows enough about you over time that we know perhaps you're a Seahawks fan, I don't know. And if you are a Seahawks fan, the system can learn that about you and may know if the Seahawks win, you're happy, and that's great. But often we have to rely on the user actually telling us how they feel. A very common model of emotion from the Russell Circumplex of Emotion back in the 80s is this one I'm showing here. It has two dimensions. The x-axis is negative to positive valence, which means sad to happy, and the y-axis is actually arousal from low to high. So if you're extremely joyous, you'll be in the upper right quadrant. If you're extremely depressed and can't move at all, you're in the lower left quadrant. But there's a whole spectrum of emotions in the two-dimensional model. So we actually ask users to tell us how they're feeling at times throughout the day. It's not the best way to collect information. People aren't actually used to thinking about how they feel, but you get better at it over time. We can also look at what the user writes or what they say in terms of content, but that's very invasive. We tend to rely on the self-report. The first thing we ever did was actually with a PhD student of Ross Picard's, Daniel McDuff. He actually built the first real-time emotional prosthetic, which allowed you to actually see how you were feeling over time, and also who you were with, what you were doing, what kind of apps you were working with on your machine, what kind of emails you were sending, and you could actually go in and look at the content of those things if you wanted to. Users told us they really liked this, not from oh, wow, this major stress event just happened in my life and I didn't know. Of course, we know as psychologists, you remember the really important things that happen in your life. It was actually more the micro patterns of badness that happened in their lives. Things they weren't actually paying attention to that actually made them feel bad, and they could make decisions about and change the way they behaved in a daily way. So that was very telling, but people told us they wanted other kinds of venues. Actually, we played with the idea, and I think you're going to see a demo of this, of actually wearing your emotions on your sleeve. So we played with clothing that actually had hackles in the back of a vest if you were angry, so people might run away from you. We actually had a little butterfly on your wrist that flapped its wings harder the more stressed out you got, which was actually the absolutely backwards way to design that. It should have been flapping its wings more slowly to calm you down. What we learned from these things, we had little desktop ambient displays that kind of told you how you were feeling, that people put a cap over as soon as their boss walked in. What we learned is that perhaps the external display of emotions isn't what people want. So about 50% of people really dislike them. Perhaps you need things that are more for you personally to reflect upon. So we moved away from those. We did have one very good success, which was a lightwear prototype. In Seattle, we have this disease. How many of you know about seasonal affective disorder? Some people get this. They claim they get it. They feel really bad. They get really depressed. So we built some prototypes that showed how you might be able to get treatment for that disorder that's actually beautiful and you wouldn't be embarrassed to wear. And also that you didn't have to sit in front of your desk for 30 minutes every morning, which was kind of, you felt like you were shackled to your desk. The glasses and the hat people especially liked and said they wouldn't even mind wearing them kind of as a fashionable item. And we always do user-centered design with everything we do, so we always do user studies. We always compare what we build to existing techniques, hear what people tell us about what they like and what they don't like, and actually have them wear it in their daily lives so we know that it's got efficacy, that it actually can be useful over the long haul. And we've moved on now to real psychological interventions. I think you heard from the previous speaker, Gabi, that you can really use this in the medical domain, and you really can. We've had some success taking apps for depression and stress into the field and having people use them over weeks.
In fact, for parents of ADHD children, we actually had an app that they're still using to this day, and that was over 2 years ago, which is pretty impressive. We have found that when you do these apps, you have to make them fun in order for people to use them in the long haul. So they both have to be medically effective, useful, but fun. I find if you make them aesthetically pleasing, it helps a lot. So we have had various designs. The one we're doing right now is actually a DBT application. DBT is the most successful therapy for, it's dialectical behavior therapy, for suicide and bipolar disorder, but you can also use it for many other serious mental illnesses. And we're having some initial success deploying that app. So just to recap, what have we learned? Users like their emotional interventions or the skills that you teach them based on their stress or their depression, whatever it is you're trying to treat. They like them to be social and they like them to be physical. So by physical, I mean things like deep breathing exercises, walking, stretching. People love that. Or they love doing it with someone else. And you can't tell users they're stressed without giving them some positive skill to cope with it. If you just show users they're stressed, it stresses them out. It's not rocket science. And with those interventions and skills that you try to teach people through apps or whatever it is, you need a lot of diversity and novelty. There's a real strong boredom factor if you keep telling them to do the same skill over and over to deal with their stress or anxiety. And we can use technology, of course have to use machine learning, to actually intervene for people in real time. For the parents of ADHD children, when we noticed that their arousal was escalating because they were wearing a bracelet that detected that, we could come in and suggest an activity to help to negate the situation, to kind of soothe the situation. And they said that was amazingly powerful. So that's what keeps us going every day, and I hope you watch for more and more activities like this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So much information. And now we're going to have Kristin Neidlinger, founder of Sensoree, with a dynamic, interactive presentation.
Thank you. I'd like to explain more about sensory therapeutic biomedia. Therapeutic biomedia is designed in a form factor that gives the wearer biofeedback, but also acts as a communication tool, a teledisplay. So what we do is we create extimacy, externalized intimacy, by taking biosensors, and they read how you're feeling in real time, and then we display that with visual or tactile displays. So from anything from LED lights to inflatables, haptics, and this exists in a niche between healthcare, fashion, and gaming. And we're creating something completely new that gives a new voice to people who might have a hard time communicating how they're feeling, or even knowing how they're feeling. I call it awareness technology. It's based on synesthesia, and in 1969, Paul Bacchi-Rita developed this field of sensory substitution. So this is actually a vibrotactile chair, where he takes an image and translates that into a vibrotactile display so blind people can actually feel an image. But what happens if maybe you could hear movement or you could see emotion? And so that's what we do. We monitor with many different biosensors here, from EEG to eye tracking, heart rate, GSR, flex sensors. And then we take that data and we translate it into visual, audio, or tactile displays. So now I'd like to introduce the mood sweater. This is our most popular design. And I have a live demo today. And this is originally was called the galvanic extimacy responder. And here we go. I'll explain how it works. The bowl-shaped collar is designed to reflect back upon the wearer to give her instant biofeedback, how she's feeling. And also gives the extimacy, projects out to communicate to other people. She's pink, which looks a little excited, ruffled. Let's see. Oh, I have some more slides. Oh, okay, wait. So this offers healthcare implications Originally, it was designed for people with sensory processing disorder, a condition from ADHD to autism, to give a voice and biofeedback. But also, we have interest with the Alzheimer's community, pediatricians, caregivers, so they can read how people are feeling. It also has implications for space travel, remote communications, as it is a social media in real time. And also with machine learning, it can learn I call it like the Pavlov for sadness. It can learn if you're dipping down into a bad place and help bring you back up. We're working on that right now. It's very exciting. So here's the palette of colors. And we have from tranquil zen, which is green, to like calm, focused blue, which Rachel's right now. And I'd like to introduce Rachel Kilmer. She's actually one of my heroes. She's a data scientist, so I'm honored that she's wearing the design today. And maybe give her the mic. She's been wearing these, what do you call them?
So,
Trackers for years.
yeah, I've been wearing between 10 and 38 wearable devices every day for the last 4 years. And though I've learned a lot about data ecosystems and my step count, one thing that none of these wearables have been able to offer is extimacy, or giving me insight and other people insight into my internal and emotional state. And so I'm really excited for things like the mood sweater and all of the emotional sensing that is on this panel, because that's something that we currently don't have, and I think it can really add a lot to the kinds of data that we can currently collect.
Thank you. She's very calm while she's speaking. Now she's a little ruffled. Thank you very much. So the sensors are located in her hands, and this is a GSR sensor. So it's monitoring her excitement level with humidity, that's moisture and heat, and translate that into the illuminated color we have here. What's really exciting is that I just found out this is the most publicized piece of wearable technology to date. So that's really exciting. It's been around the world, just got back from Russia. And I'll show you a couple other pieces we're working on or that exist. Thank you very much. And we'll have the mood sweater also out at the booth so you can try it yourself during the conference. Here's another piece. It's called the Neurotique. This one has a EEG, so it maps your brain data. And we translate the colors into, well, your brain state into color. So we can see how your brain is in real time and where you're having activity. This is 3D printed and hand knitted. Let's see, and we're doing research on this one right now. We're looking at how people react with this extimacy and if it does build empathy, and if people like to wear it. And right now I'm currently working on goosebumps. I'm obsessed with goosebumps and the emotional ones. It's called Frisian in France, the ones you get from aesthetics, like seeing a beautiful setting like Yosemite, or good artwork, or hearing a really good song, or having that aha moment. So I've been creating inflatables that respond to this moment of awe. And this is the most recent design, and then I got really inspired by that, and I'm working on remote goosebumps, inspired by that phrase, that gave me goosebumps, did you feel it too? So we now have a goosebump remote sending wearable that we're researching. And please look at our website to look at more of our products, and try the mood sweater today to see how you're feeling. Thank you very much.
Great. So there's so much information that was presented here. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. And we would like to open the panelists up to questions now, if you have any.
Good morning, and thank you all. One quick question. Regarding some of the ground truth that you spoke of, I'm wondering if there has been any work looking at standardized psychometric tests. The CES for depression, for example, or Zung, or state trait anxiety inventory, anything which has been correlated with what we would call more standardized psychometric instruments? Thank you.
Yes, we do all kinds of tests with all the patients and users that we do studies on. So we can kind of correlate, even with their self-reports, how the physiological measures correlate with both standardized tests and their own self-reports. It's very interesting because there's not always a super high correlation, especially with self-reports. So it's very important to do these things over time, repeatedly. But some of the state trait anxiety scales and whatnot, those don't move a lot, and we do get good correlation with those.
How good? What is your Pearson R?
It varies study to study, and we don't always have a huge sample. So, usually when we're doing a 4-week study, it's like 80 people, and we get a good correlation there. I don't know exactly what the correlation number is.
I'll take a rough estimate.
Like a 80%.
That's pretty good, thank you.
That's not bad.
Yeah, so great presentations, very exciting work. I just want to follow up on the prior question. Just again about, we know that biometric data, galvanic skin response, heart rate variability, there's a relatively modest correlation between those particular measures and any emotional state, both at a state or trait level. And so I think what people are trying to do is kind of put those things together to create a multidimensional space where we can be more accurate. So I wonder if anybody would talk a little bit about your approach to how you do that, and a little bit more about your sense of how accurate your readings from these biometric devices are in terms of identifying emotion. For example, I think Mary, you said, it was really interesting, well, we're moving now from sort of biometric identification of affect to intervention, which I think is great. But I think from the science point of view, I was sort of a little surprised because from my understanding of the literature, we're still at the state of trying to understand how these biometric signals actually inform us about affect.
I'll go ahead and just jump in on that. So in the DBT app that I was talking about, which is the most serious application that we've designed so far, we're actually only using self-report. The patients we're looking at are actually already in therapy, so we have a lot of information about them from the therapist and then from themselves. But the sensors we'll be using during the deployment are actually the sensors of how frequently they use the app, what they're saying, their stress levels are, their suicidal ideation is, et cetera, et cetera. So those won't be physiological sensors per se, although we do have one diary card in the application where they will be recorded, both their voice, if they let us, and their face. And that's when we can start doing some physiological sensing. And then it will be very interesting to see if we can actually see improvement in the face and the voice in terms of affect, or even if it matches their self-reports, there's going to be some really interesting data there. That study doesn't start for 2 weeks, so I don't actually have any positive answer for you there.
And maybe we could take a step back, and I think, Gabi, you at Affectiva, you guys spent a number of years gathering data on what muscles in the face actually correspond to certain emotions, and could you just go into how you gathered that data?
Yeah, absolutely, I'd be happy to. So as I mentioned, we first got started in media and advertising, testing how people respond and emote, if you will, to digital content. And initially through that work, we've gathered massive amounts of data. Now that we're expanding into all these other markets, we're gathering even more data, so it's growing every single day. But we've built the largest emotion database in the world. We've analyzed as of this week, I think it's 4.7 million faces in 75 countries. What's noteworthy, I think, is that this is data that's captured in the wild, so people expressing emotion wherever they happen to be, so it's not in optimal lab conditions with optimal lighting and a frontal-facing camera. It's as a matter of fact, very challenging data from a machine learning perspective. Also important to point out is that this data has all been collected with opt-in and consent. We believe that people need to agree to have their faces recorded, and we feel quite strongly about that. But in addition to that, you mentioned ground truth. For our data, we do that as well. We have in Cairo a team of manual labelers. For those of you familiar with the facial action coding system, these are fax coders, certified fax coders, that manually annotate video, and that serves as the ground truth against which we test our algorithms. In terms of accuracy, depending, of course, on certain contexts, because we're in so many different markets, on average, our classifiers have accuracy in the high 90th percentile, so continuously fine-tuning that.
So I think taking a step back, we want to emphasize that emotion sensing technology is a new field, and these women are really groundbreakers in gathering a lot of data. This is probably the biggest amount of data that's ever been gathered in this space, and the correlation is happening. I think our traditional markers of anxiety, depression, that was all developed in static. You ask the patient, 100 questions, are they depressed or are they not depressed? The big question I think we're facing in moving forward is, are those even going to be valid as we collect so much data? You know, what are they going to mean when you have just a continuous stream of data coming in? So with these emerging technologies, I think the women here have created so much data, and we're getting to the point of validating. I was wondering if we could speak a little bit to the exciting areas that you think that it's going to have the biggest impact, or what you've seen the biggest impact in.
I'd be happy to comment, but maybe one of you would like to go first.
I think we don't even know yet. There's so much opportunity, especially with my designs. I'm interested in nonverbal communicating and some kind of psychic communication, more intuition, more empathy. That's the opportunity that I see, and I'm so excited. I can't wait for it to happen.
Yeah. From our perspective, especially if I try and tie it back to healthcare as well, you know, we've gotten very good at quantifying the physical self, you know, the physical aspects, you know, with sensors and medical data. For the most part in consumer health, mental well-being and quantifying and measuring and tracking that is still missing from that equation, and we feel very strongly about being able to kind of portray the whole physical human well-being and physical health. Now, to that effect, you know, I should stress, we are not clinicians. We are a software company. We develop emotion recognition technology, and we look to partner with those people that are the experts in their field, whether or not they're doing research in treating autism or depression or anxieties, or if they're building telehealth or telemedicine video platforms. We can partner, and we do partner with those type of organizations. I think looking out to the future, what personally really excites me is for me, it's almost like an inevitable path that we're going to get better at quantifying mood and mental health. And I personally kind of imagine this future where we as individuals also have our emotion passport, if you will. So it's basically our personal profile. You know, we've tracked longitudinal data of how we as a person, as an individual, express our emotions. And we can marry that with other data. And we can hopefully one day have this personal emotion passport that we can take with us from one to another digital experience, whether or not it's getting in my car, whether or not it's doing video conference at work, whether or not I'm doing tele-video conferencing with my doctor. You can set baselines for your own personal health, and if you start deviating from your norm, maybe some kind of intervention that you as an individual define takes place. You know, my level of anger in a car is maybe very different than your level of anger. And maybe if I get angry, that's a problem because that could turn into road rage. And so you can't just have these broad brush marks of what emotions are. You need to look at the individual. And so if I had that emotion profile and I stepped in my car and I deviated from my norm, there would be maybe an intervention. Maybe the music would turn on, or it would recommend I just get off the road and take a break. Or if I'm under medical treatment and I'm taking medication and suddenly there's some changes in my mood, that with my approval could give an alert to my doctor who could maybe look into the dosage of the medication I'm taking. So I think the promise of this in the future is super exciting. I'll be the first to admit some of it is early stages, but it's real and it's here now, and I think we'll see these advancements quite rapidly.
So just building on that, how many of you have seen the movie Her? Yeah. So I think actually the future is even more intense than that. So I think that, you know, it's the day of conversational agents. Conversational agents are here. Conversational agents could actually be your teledoctor. Conversational agents could be your teletherapist. Conversational agents could just be someone who knows you really, really well. And I think in order for you to trust that agent, to share information with that agent, to give that agent the authority or the ability to communicate with loved ones or your caretakers, you would have to really have a very tight rapport with that agent. We've started out doing research on teaching doctors how to have a better bedside manner, and as soon as we can do that, you can imagine all kinds of things happening. But I think the future really is in an intelligent agent that you trust, that really knows you really well and can help take care of you. And talking about aging, which we just heard about in the last 2 sessions, I think this could be really important, not just in an agent that you don't see, but even in a robot that perhaps is physically there with you. So I think that's coming too. The last thing I'll say is in some of the therapies, one of the cool things we can use machine learning to do is actually see where the therapy is working for you personally. So if you have a mental health disease, and there's an intelligent agent that is tracking what is working for you and why and when and where, that actually changes psychiatry. And it's something we're really excited about in the psychiatrists and psychologists we're partnering with. So that's another really cool thing that's happening in the future.
Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to add on that. Some of that is already here today. So these advanced AI systems or these intelligent agents are, from our perspective, critical that those that are designed to engage with humans need to understand human emotion and adapt their course of action to what they perceive. But in the example of robots, there are some out there already, like Catalia Health has a robot for healthcare settings, engaging with patients in clinical settings, and they are currently using our SDK to embed emotion in that robot. So some of it is happening now.
Yep.
Great, so we'll take another question. I think you, sir?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Charlie Atkinson. I'm a president and founder of the Whole Brain Foundation in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm interested in the conceptual framework for the mind and the emotions of the body that you use as the architecture to think about the structure, function, network, interconnections that you build into the apps that you're developing, if anyone has a thought on that. I'm happy to explain it more.
We don't have an architecture yet in our research, sorry.
Not to the level that you're describing, we don't know.
Well, I mean, if you're thinking about the whole brain, mind, and body, and is it the frameworks can be an alphanumeric, I'll put everything in alphabetical or numerical order, or it can be organized around the body systems, or, and I'm working on a 3-dimensional conceptual framework for the human mind that connects the process of creativity from the back of the brain to the front of the brain, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, and the humanity, and that's creativity, and the left and right from the side of the brain as a way of understanding humanity, and then from the base of the brain up to the cerebral cortex as a way of understanding knowledge and technology.
Charlie.
And I built that as a cube, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it sometime.
Thank you, Charlie. I think maybe we could take that question and learn more about what is the most exciting, is it the EEG, is the galvanic skin response? What particular thing, physiological response, have you measured that you feel like is the most useful?
I think it's a combination where you can find some nice data. But yeah, I don't think it's just the brain, but if you cross it with the brain and gesture and some heart rate variability,
The more sensors, the better. Let's
Yes,
put it that way.
yeah, we wholeheartedly agree. Like for us right now, we're very much focused on the facial analysis and measuring facial expression of emotion. So in certain use cases or scenarios, that is extremely handy, if you will, because there is no ability to use sensors or get other modal input. But in general, the more data inputs you have, the more accurate the whole picture becomes. And I think it's not just the biometric data. In certain use cases, it's also environmental data that surrounds it, right? I mentioned earlier automotive, but if you get, for example, traffic patterns and weather patterns and add that into other data.
And it depends on the question you're asking, too. We study programmers a lot because we're Microsoft, and it turns out programmers don't really emote that much when they're coding. But if you look at if you track their eyes, their pupil dilation becomes huge when they get into hard areas of the code. And you can see where code should probably be refactored just based on their pupil dilation alone. So every question maybe sometimes demands a different kind of sensory.
Yeah, and it's contextual, right? I mean, pain in certain settings can vary greatly. Frustration in education is very different than frustration in driving.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Hi, your joyful friend again.
Hi, Melody.
So what brought me into Connected Health was taking care of my grandmother when she was dying of cancer in rural Pennsylvania. And I'm wondering what research has been done or might be done to kind of follow sensory during the process of death and dying, and what impact that could have on palliative care.
Yeah, I think, Melody, that's a really great question. And for us as an organization, we have not done any research or been part of any research in that yet. I imagine there's huge opportunities there, but we just don't have the experience yet.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to apply the training to doctors on bedside manner,
Yes.
for instance, especially when they're possibly remote, because you said rural Pennsylvania. A lot of the social cues will be missing because it's a kind of a dry context, if you will, or a context that lacks cues. And so it would be really important in that case, I think, if it's a remote interaction, that that doctor have really good bedside manner and really emotes and sympathizes well. So that's just an idea.
That's actually a really good point. We've had conversations, nothing real out there yet, but about how this technology could be used in empathy training for physicians, but also in these telemedicine communications, right? These remote medicine communications, being able to measure mood and measure how people are responding to each other can really enhance those communications in a more empathic manner.
Yes.
Great, we have time for one last question.
Yeah, just 2 parts. One is about emotion sensing and sleep, whether you've actually tried to detect emotions kind of going to sleep and during sleep, and insomnia, waking up in the middle of the night, that sort of area. And then thinking about all the impacts. And then relative to that, can you do, HRV being a key element of that, can you do HRV effectively actually via the wrist or via an SpO2 sort of sensor? So get a sense of two parts, but thinking about sleep in that context and how do you do it in a kind of an effective way, and yeah, just your experience in those spaces.
We've done a lot of research on sleep and stress and productivity. One kind of funny anecdote about sensors. Sensors have to be charged. And a lot of time when you charge the sensors is when you go to sleep. So the only sensors so far that last a long time while you sleep is something like the Fitbit. So we do see waking and sleep cycles through the Fitbit a lot of times, and then we see the repercussions when you don't sleep enough or when you didn't have good sleep the next day or even the next following days because you get a sleep deficit worked up, and that can impact productivity and stress. But a lot of the questions you asked about HRV and whatnot, people take those off at night and charge them. They're just too uncomfortable, and I'm not aware of anything that can give you HRV off the wrist yet.
Great, so we're at time. Maybe we can hear last kind of closing thoughts from our panelists.
Well, I'm excited for the future, and I'm really excited to be on this panel with these pioneers. Please contact us for collaborations or commissions. We love partnering to develop new language and design. Thank you.
And I'd just like to say stay tuned, because I think this is going to be an amazing field, and it's just going to explode. As you heard, it's very nascent right now, but it's going to really take off as the sensors get better, more wearable, waterproof, easier, hopefully, in fabrics that we can wear. I think the future is going to be much brighter because of our ability to learn about emotion and use that as an extra input stream in terms of what we know about the user.
Yeah, I totally second that. It's exciting what's coming our way, and it's not even that far off anymore. For us as Affectiva, we make our technology available to anyone who would like to work with it. We are very keen, especially in healthcare. All these different use cases we see, many of them are near and dear to our hearts, but we are not the medical experts, so we want to partner with those who are and make our technology available to them. So anyone who's interested, we are out there. We have a booth. A couple of my colleagues are there today. We're also doing live demos there. So what I just showed with Melody on stage, anyone can come up there and just try it themselves. So yeah, I'm excited for the future.
Great. Thank you, and thank you for being part of this panel.
Thank you.